Thanks for rolling, Mr. Chair.
All right. I forgot my gavel, so this is it. I call
Hit
the,
your head on the table. Just hit your head on the table.
I'll call the December 12th, 2023 meeting of the West Dakota Water Development District to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dan, would you call the roll, please?
Roll call for December 12th, 2023. Coth.
Here.
Yerke.
Here.
Driscoll.
Here.
McGregor.
Here.
Ackerman.
Here.
Rowe.
Here.
Mack.
Here.
Fleming.
Here.
Kerr.
Here.
All present. We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. The next item is approval of today's agenda. Any items on the agenda that you'd like to have changed? Do you have it on?
I'd like to request item number 8 be moved down between 15 and 16. Those are all sort of related topics, and 8 will be sort of isolated if it's not in with the rest of it.
Okay, sounds good. Any other changes? Dan?
For number 9, I think we had intended to include also the gauge on Castle Creek above Deerfield. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
Castle Creek Gauging Station. Did you have something, Scott?
Yeah, I think we ought to move 16 up to have 16 before we consider either 8 or 15.
Item 16,
Yeah, so it'd be 16, 15, and 8.
okay.
So he wants the update before the other two items, and I think that's how he wants it, is suggesting, so we hear about the Water Smart grant and what we've done.
Should we move that up above 8? Is that what you're saying?
No, well, we've already moved 8 down between 15 and 16.
Yes.
So I'd like to move 16 up above 8. So we would consider
Oh, okay.
16 first, then 15.
Okay, so
then
8 will be 15, 16, and 8.
Yeah, so we get the update before we start considering more money.
Does that make sense for you, Ron?
Doesn't matter, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, sounds good. Any other changes to the agenda?
Move to approve.
Moved by Dan, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign, motion carries. The next item is conflict of interest. Are there any items on
Move
today's
to
agenda?
approve the minutes.
Oh,
We gotta move the minutes.
I'm sorry.
I move. So moved.
Item 4.
I second.
We're gonna approve the minutes for both the October 10th and the November 1st, right?
Right.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign?
Is there a second on that?
I second it.
Get a couple of them.
Yeah.
Robert.
Robert?
And
Robert second.
let's see, the agenda, that was
I move.
Driscoll.
Okay. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Who
Motion
seconded
carries.
the agenda?
Robert.
We caught up?
Almost.
Greg wants to be out of here by 5.
Okay, I think I'm good.
Okay, now, item 5, conflict of interest. Are there any items on today's agenda that any director would have a conflict of interest? Not hearing any, we'll move on to the treasurer's report, number 6. Dan? We got a new guest. You better be in order, Dan.
I did. Okay, we have revenue received to date, primarily taxes, but some interest, $256,758. And checking and savings, we have 196,565. Then we have 4 CDs here, and the total of the checking and savings and the CDs is 716,405. Project expenditures to date are 150,746. And if we add the admin, that makes the total expenditures to date $198,808. And the project list is up to date. And the balance remaining, if we paid off all those projects, would be $298,403. We just got a big tax revenue deposit, by the way. Mr. McGregor was asking about that the other day. So that's, there's a Gantt chart there of our projects, but that's basically it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the treasurer's report? I would moved by Ron, seconded by Thomas. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Hold the same sign, motion carries. Thank you. Dan? Item number 7 is authorize the administrator to renew the membership in the South Dakota Association of Rural Water Systems. Just briefly, that's an organization that we have supported for as long as I can remember. I'd have somebody entertain a motion for approval.
How
I
much?
move to approve.
Moved by Craig,
How much
seconded
is
by
it? How much is it?
$550
Okay.
annually. Are you seconding it?
Sure.
Okay. Seconded by Cheryl. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Hold the same sign, motion carries.
On behalf of the State Association, I would thank you for your continued membership. I'm the state board rep for the Class C membership, and that is where West Dakota along with East Dakota resides.
Very good, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so item 8 we moved down, so I guess we go with number 9. Funding of the USGS Rhodes Fork and Castle Creek gauges for the water year 2024. Dan, do you want to?
So we've got a funding agreement from USGS in our packet for the 2 gauges, and I guess I didn't look in detail at the split on it. It really doesn't matter. But most of you will probably remember that I'd developed an opinion that we should look at on the Rhodes Fork gauge, instead of funding it as a continuous record gauge, basically scale it back to what's called a peak flow crest stage gauge, peak flow record, which also would include 4 measurements per year. And my opinion is that that would adequately continue characterizing the flow there, because there's so little variability. At our special meeting, I'd mentioned that to the group, a quick overview on it, and asking whether there might be any other entities out there that might be interested in supporting the continuous record part of it. And we'd agreed to continue funding it for this year to see if there'd be allow time to see if there might be another interested party, and kind of fell off the front burner and didn't really get around to looking at that. So I revisited that, actually visited with folks at USGS last week. Steve Fuller from USGS is here, and he had indicated that the Forest Service has since expressed interest in funding part of that gauge. And and was the arrangement that they would pay for 1/2 of the gauge?
That's correct. The Forest Service has shown an interest in the gauge. They find that information valuable to them. And they're currently looking into getting funding to help fund half the O&M for the next 3 years. Not sure if that funding would come through this year because of the way the Congress hasn't passed our '24 budget yet. So they're a little hesitant on making a move, but they are interested in looking into it. It could be if it happens, it could be something we prorate the end of the year. If not, start that first thing fresh next for FY25.
Okay.
But the way the arrangement would work, they're not eligible for the co-op match, so they would fund half of the gauge, and then we would help fund the other half, which would, continue to get the same match ratio we've got now.
Yes.
And so I'm not concerned about splitting nickels. If there's somebody else that wants to step into the batter's box like that, I'll, be happy to do so. And, for now, continue to support it for this year. And then I guess the furthermore is that gauge may also become a candidate for a federal priorities program.
Yes, so if you're not familiar with it's called FPS, Federal Priority Stream Gauging, and it just rolled out last week. And what it is it's a way for the USGS to secure more appropriated funds through Congress. And we'll be setting up meetings with our federal partners, being the Forest Service, the Park Service, Corps of Engineers, and the Weather Service, Eurobrec, and finding what gauges in the Dakotas or nationwide that they have an interest in. And I'll make my recommendation to the Federal Priority Stream Gauge folks. And it's not a guarantee that the gauge will get funded, but it's a tool that will, show that, hey, we have X number of gauges that need to be part of a federal program. And hopefully that will give us a little bit more leverage to get some more appropriated funding to help support these gauges from Congress. So that, and this is something we're starting right now, so the soonest that we would see additional funds would be probably FY26, if not all the way into FY27.
So for this year, there's probably nothing going to happen. Is that what you're saying?
That's
Okay.
correct.
So the amount on the funding agreement for the West Dakota side is $16,450, and with that as background, I'll move that we fund the 2 gauges for $16,450 for the upcoming water year.
Seconded by Robert? Yes, you second. Okay, seconded by Robert. Okay, discussion on the motion. Scott?
Why are we paying $5,000 more than USGS?
That's the way the split score has been.
I know that, but why? I mean, it's their gauges.
I can explain that.
I don't know.
Well, having worked for USGS for 30 years, and most of that is the studies chief, so I would negotiate with cooperators how we would fund these projects. What had been for many years a 50-50 arrangement, as of about, let's say in round numbers, the turn of the century, Congress failed to continue to add funds to the co-op program essentially commensurate with inflation. So the co-op dollars have remained stagnant and very, very small growth, and the costs of gauges along with the cost of doing hydrologic studies continued to go up. So when that started happening, there began a shift to where everything that the USGS does is somewhat less than a 50-50 match, and that match ratio is getting smaller for the cooperator with every passing year.
What was it for us last year?
Roughly the same.
It's
There
pretty
has
close.
been a 2.3% inflationary increase, but we're still matching at 41%.
So basically, we're picking up the shortfall for Congress failing to give you an adequate budget.
Yes and no. So the federal priority strain gauge that I just mentioned, those are gauges that are identified to be a federal priority. If we don't identify those as a federal priority, if we don't have matching dollars to come in, we will not support those gauges. So even though it's our USGS stream gauge, we would have no interest in that gauge if it wasn't for you folks helping support it. So that's
Just on that one gauge?
well, on all of our gauges
All
throughout
the
the whole
gauges.
state, and really, and we match the CMF funds. These are kind of legacy. To be blunt, we don't match any more new work with CMF funds. So any new cooperators that come to us, if they have interest in the gauge, we don't supply those matching funds. The CMF program was set up originally to help bring in new work, but this is kind of a legacy that we have them tied to this gauge, or a lot of our gauges throughout the state. Sooner or later, I will be tasked to reduce the amount of matching funds we have available for what we consider legacy stream gauges. Because the CMF was originally designed to bring in new work into the center. So we're actually using CMF.
Are you telling me your whole stream gauge program is just a make work project?
A make work project, I don't.
Well, you said you don't have any interest in these gauges if we didn't support the funding, and that the whole gauge system was set up to bring work into,
No.
that's what you just said.
No, so we don't, so what it is, so like the state of South Dakota comes to me, they have an interest in supporting these gauges to support their interests. So we bring cooperators together, partners together to help support them. But we don't, at USGS ourselves, we necessarily don't have an interest in the gauge unless it supports a project. That, even then though, if we have a project, we aren't funding those gauges, we're not 100% appropriated funds. We are looking for folks like yourselves, cooperators, to help support part of these gauges. Does that clear that up?
In my mind, that makes it worse, but this is gonna pass, so let's not take any more time.
All the other cooperators are paying that same
Yes.
percent increase. correct?
Yes, all of our cooperators across the board are paying that increase.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I've got one other question on those lines. So the gauges, your match ratio is roughly 40%
Yes.
federal. What is it for the hydrologic studies these days? In
Well,
general,
so-
I mean,
so
they're not
ours-
all the same, but
It's, well, yes and no. I can't tell you what it is for studies. I really can't. Ours overall, because for you folks it's 40%, but if you look at my network overall, we're more like 27%. Because not every cooperator gets 40%. Some cooperators get nothing at all. So we're running around for network-wise, for every single stream gauge, if you just took it all, lump it into one big pie, we are at 27%. So studies would be getting roughly the remainder.
anyhow, the match ratio for most of the studies, I'm pretty sure is quite a bit less than 40% because of necessity.
Yeah, well, it's split up amongst all those studies.
Right, but as the match dollars became progressively sparser, the way it was shifting was that, there was more. They were weighted more heavily to the gauges to keep the gauge network in operation.
Right. And we do, and I try to bring in other partners on gauges. For example, the road sport gauge, I've talked to the Forest Service, trying to bring them on board. And then to let this group know, you may not know that Castle Creek is partially supported by the Bureau of Rec also.
Right. Yeah.
So Castle Creek has 3 partners involved on that
Yeah.
one.
I was aware of that. Is that the end of the discussion, Scott?
So
Yeah, I don't see any reason to drag this out. I mean, like I said.
I'm
it's
just
gonna-
wondering, who's using the road sport data?
I know the Forest Service does.
Somebody's using it.
Well, it sounds like we're silence now, so,
Call the question.
yeah, you call the question, okay.
Yeah.
So, would you read the motion again, Dan?
Motion by Driscoll, seconded by Ackerman to fund USGS Roads Fork and Castle Creek gauges for $16,450 for water year 2024.
Very good. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chairman, I abstain.
One abstention from Scott. Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
could I just add a thought here on this before we move on to the next
Sure.
item?
sure.
I find it interesting we're considering not funding some of these gauges. In my mind, 4 years ago, that was a huge matter that created so much controversy among this board
We did.
was not funding those gauges. So I'd like to know what's changed in the last 3-4 years.
What's changed as far as funding it, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, now we're talking about not funding.
Oh, just the one, because.
Yeah, just the one, but when the board, and I wasn't on the board
Well,
then, but
the
my
way-
understanding
The way Dan
was.
explained it was, and they've, how long has that station been there?
What the situation is that, again, worked for USGS not quite forever, but I was never a proponent of gauging for the sake of gauging. If the gauge isn't useful, you don't continue to run it
Right.
forever. Well, it turns out the flow of that spring has so little variability, it's not worth paying what it costs to run that full-time operation. But it is useful to do this partial record where it's basically a much reduced cost. But with the Forest Service stepping forward to help fund it, that to me solves my price. If there's somebody that's willing to be in the batter's box,
They must think it's good information if they're willing to step up and
Well,
fund part of it.
one of the things that came to light when I looked closely at the record was that even though the day-to-day variability is negligible, it turns out that the flow rate has increased something on the order of 30%, give or take. I'm kind of going from memory, but because of all the timber harvest, because of the bark beetle infestation, and that's been kind of known for many years that basically they use a lot of water. So it turns out the gauge was pretty useful to identify that, and I don't know if anyone has looked at other gauges out there, but it was just very evident in the Rhodes Fork gauge that all of a sudden it stepped up there.
All right, we're ready to move on.
If I may, I have a simple question. How does one spell the word gauge?
USGS spells it G-A-G-E.
Okay, I was wondering about, okay.
The rest of the world puts a U in there.
Thank you.
We learned something today. Okay, that was item.
I remember I got in trouble in 7th grade for writing that two people were engaged, E-N-G-A-U-G-E.
Well, item number 10, Lindsay walked in the door right at the absolutely perfect time.
Did I?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
your item is up next.
Awesome.
We're gonna get an update from Lindsay Mayer here, from the Pennington County Conservation District on our water quality project out in Rocky Valley. Lindsay,
Hi.
go for it.
I'm Lindsay. I'm from the Pennington Conservation District. The update on our project is that we are still working on allocating the money through the MRCS to the producers. And so we don't believe that we should ask you guys for the money until we know where we're going to spend it. So, that's pretty much the update on that. If anyone has questions.
So could you, for the benefit, a couple of DANR folks here, we're going to be talking topics of interest. Could you give just a brief update on what does this project look like?
Yep. So, before this project came about, we started working on the irrigation ditches in, I guess, along Rapid Creek, to help the water tables that were higher up and now we're working on the land that's down by Rapid Creek. There's a lot of practices that producers they're doing down there that are not very conservation friendly. And so we're trying to encourage better conservation practices and help cost share things like stream bars and things that can maybe help Rapid Creek get to its natural state, I guess. Dan did tell me that DANR was wanting to talk about potential future projects along Rapid Creek. Is that?
Well, that's coming up
Agenda.
later in our agenda.
So you're welcome to.
So I think, okay, I think if I could be here for that conversation, I think it would be good. I do think that our current project would be a good fit from what I'm hearing so far. I need to hear more details, but if not, we can definitely, we would like to partner in the future on something going forward, so.
So,
In a nutshell, what
One question I have, Lindsay, is this was originally a 3-year program?
Yep.
So is 1 year evaporated out of that 3 years, or how does that work?
Yeah, so originally it still is a 3-year program. How we worded it in the JPA with you guys was we were going to put money in a separate checking account and not pay anything on it until we had receipts. We are not to the point where we can get receipts from producers. So, since it's a 3-year project, they have that time to work on their stuff. And the NRCS will still be allocating more money throughout those full 3 years.
So the start of the timing doesn't start until we actually have a project, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess.
Gotcha. You got a question there?
Chris Dozark, DANR. I'm assuming these are CIS projects?
Yep.
and it is basically from, is it Jolly Lane downstream? Is that the upstream extent of the original project, and then you've moved another notch farther downstream?
Yeah, so the first project was the St. Germain irrigation ditch.
Oh, right.
And if we extended it, we were going to move to Lone Tree, I think was the next one. And then after that, the project area for what you guys were involved in was from Jolly Lane to Antelope Creek Road.
Okay, so a future project would continue on downstream from Antelope Creek.
But that's what we would like to see.
Right,
yes.
that would be the most likely scenario.
Yeah.
Right, so things that we would do upstream from Jolly Lane wouldn't really fit in with our current project.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any got a question? Jay?
Yeah, Lindsay, Jay Gilbertson, East Dakota Water, the other side of the state. What sorts of, I assume you're implementing BMPs with the landowners, best management practices. What sorts of things are you doing related to the irrigation ditches?
Related to the irrigation ditches, mostly was we're wanting to put in sensors for irrigation. We're wanting to cover up the ditches and put pipeline.
Okay.
Some of the ditches are historical, so we can't touch them, and so we'll have to leave them, but we can still convert them to pipeline.
So you have to leave the ditch in place, but the water you could move in a pipe.
That's what the NRCS says.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
I think we also have grazing management underneath the irrigation stuff. I want to say we had maybe some food plot stuff written in there too.
Any riparian work?
Not that I recall.
Any other questions for Lindsay? Thanks for
Mr.
coming.
Chair?
Go ahead.
Lindsay Dan Wiley, so would you put the St. Germain ditch as a pipe? Or-
I don't know what they decided to do. I guess that was part of the conversations. I know they originally wanted to talk about putting a rubber belly in there, I think. But because it's a ditch that's historical, I don't think they can touch it. I don't really know where we stand on that 100% right now.
Thank you.
And that's coming from NRCS.
Paul, do you have another question?
Yeah, I got
Oh,
a
go ahead.
question. Is the irrigation primarily, flood irrigation in that area?
Yeah.
Or is- Okay. Any, talk future-wise in terms of sprinkler, conversion or any of that stuff? Or
Like
is-
pivots,
Yeah.
that's a part of the project too,
It
is
is,
trying to
okay.
get some pivots out there, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, was that one activity that would be eligible under our arrangement or not?
I mean, we funded that kind of stuff.
We
Was
just,
for
we
the
had
Bill
talked
Foods.
about not funding sprinkler systems.
Yeah, you guys are not, so when we came and asked you guys for money, that it wasn't for the first project, it was for the second
Right.
project.
Right.
The second project had nothing to do with I mean, it has something to do with it, cause it's the same general area. But it's no irrigation on
Right.
the second one.
Okay, so conversion to sprinklers was not an activity that would be eligible under our.
For West Dakota, no.
Right.
Yeah, we discussed that at the time.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Lindsay? Seeing none, thank you, Lindsay, for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, item number 11, update of the stormwater mitigation and erosion control project. Director Driscoll.
So the stormwater mitigation front has been very much a back burner about all that's gone on since my last, our last full meeting. I did meet with facilities director from the South Dakota Wildland Fire Group. We have looked at the possibility of a little project basically on the north side of them, basically at the east end of, I don't know if it's South Street out there, or if it's West South Street, just south of Mary Hall Park and just west then of Lime Creek. They're gonna be putting in a new building out there, and there's room for a small detention cell that would mitigate, runoff from impervious surfaces that already exist within their complex, as well as an apartment complex, uphill from them, as well as runoff from that part of South Street that's gravel. So they remain interested, and basically the next step for them was to wait until they knew where the building was going to go and factor that in. On the erosion control front, there have been two main activities. It's been a couple of weeks or so ago, the days are kind of blurring together, but a couple of weeks ago, we installed 2,200 feet of wattles at the LaCroix Links project. The city's wildland fire mitigation team was able to help us with that, and then we ended up with just enough people to carry a 100-foot wattle in. If we'd been one person short, we would have been hurting, but it went pretty quickly, and by sometime before noon, the wattles were all carried in, and it didn't take long to stake them down, and a little more time to get trailers back, and I think that will largely cure the LaCroix area, I hope. There's some amount of vegetation in there. It's not total blowout, and I'm optimistic that'll pretty much cure it. There are a couple areas of pretty much bare shale where we hope to do some topsoiling, and the fire team will be able to help with that. They say that they're not just fire mitigation, they're really the city's kind of overall land management helpers too. So I'd mentioned before, they were kind of a new entity for us, and they're really helping provide the help that we'd hoped the Parks Department could provide, and they haven't really stepped to the plate on that, but these guys are really, really making a difference there. And then the other main activity, actually I feel bad for Craig because he called me. I was on the way to the East Dakota conference there a couple of months ago, and he said, well, are we going to haul any leaves in this year? He spotted some leaf bags around. I said, well, sorry, Craig, but I'm gone over there for a couple of days, and then pheasant hunting season starts, and then pretty soon I had to get things out of my garden, and a number of other things came up, but you'll be happy to know we kind of put on I guess you'd seen the emails, we put on a push here over the course of about 10 days there. It'd add up to something on the order of 700 or so lawn bags, I suppose. I don't know how many pickup and trailer loads, and a few other people helped bring in some leaves, and we pretty much managed to cover most of the areas at Star Village where it can really do some good. So, that's been officially decommissioned as of last Friday. But we did a tour there today with Paul and Chris, showing them that project and showing them where some of the leaves from previous years are, still there, and it always kind of amazes me how good a job they do of holding things in place. So there's a fair amount of effort, but virtually no cost, and it's a helpful thing. So that's all I've got on that one.
Okay, thank you for the update. So item number 12 is a proposal for a 1-year extension with our collaborative agreements with, how do you pronounce that? Sadiq, with Sadiq and the Rapid City Parks Department on our erosion control project at Star Village. And along with that, you're wanting some additional money, $15,000 of additional funding. So go ahead.
So before I make any motions, I'll start out with a bit of background. Our current agreement with both entities ends here at the end of December. A year ago, we had extended these agreements for basically a year as a no-cost extension. I had contacted the City Parks Department many months ago to try to begin working on basically a new work plan, a new agreement. Things are changing a little bit, and I was slow to get them to move on it, but I did manage to meet with them early last week. It's clear that it's going to take more time than I'd originally envisioned to really put together a new plan on it. I'd hoped to have a new plan in place for January 1, and I'm not sure how long it will take. One of the big variables is item 13, the potential watershed improvement project. Could very well come into play there, and it may well work out that we'll wait to see where things stand there before we really put a new plan in place. So I think for now the best thing to do is to just extend our current work plan another year, just to buy some time. So in terms of what the future holds, what the past has held, basically we've been chipping away at the edges. Basically for the most part, one of the things we have done was to really mitigate the head cut and several side cuts along there, primarily by installing a couple lines of wattles and then placing leaves and other yard waste along there, and oftentimes scavenging limbs in the area, just trying to keep it from enlarging. And actually in places, we've moved some of our sediment and compost mix, in essence our topsoil, moved that in our cargo sleds in places and seeded it. So we're actually shrinking the erosion scar in those areas. We put in some silt fences to keep sediment on site. The wattles that we installed, the 7,000 feet of wattles that went in as the United Way Day of Caring project, is meant to deflect sediment away from the silt fences and continue to buy us some time. But in the long run, what really needs to be done is heavy equipment. It's going to take something on the order of 125 to 150 truckloads of dirt to basically be spread with a dozer and, topsoil, seed it, blanket and just cure the thing. It's going to take some money, going to take some time, and that will be the mainstay of the upcoming agreement. But again, or the upcoming work plan. Again, I think it's prudent to wait and see how this potential water and shed improvement project plays out.
So you're just asking for an extension, not additional money?
Well, that's the next point, and I'm kind of on the fence whether, I guess I'd like to entertain a discussion of whether or not we put additional funds into place. I just thought, well, we're going to need some, but let's look at the treasurer's report.
I'm just looking at the treasurer's.
9,800 left.
Looks like
Still
we
about
have
10,000.
We have about $9,800 left from those two.
Right, and
two
so
contracts.
One of the
How does that fit?
the two biggest needs are, one, on the northeast corner of the project, where there's a driveway that goes to the west into the apartment complex. There are the two apartments just west of East Boulevard. I've got a hope that we'll build a retaining wall there sooner rather than later, and that's not necessarily a high dollar project. Another main need is where we go in off West Boulevard at the top. That dirt trail needs to be rebuilt and the approach to the street completely redone so that we can begin to get dump trucks in there, end dumps and side dumps. I guess one way to approach it would be, there's no hurry to appropriate any additional funds today. If I haven't had time to say, well, what would we do with additional funds? That would be kind of my starting point. But one very easy approach. Let's say something came up. I could ask for more funds in January easily enough, or in March. So I guess I'd like to hear from the directors before I make a motion, how you'd prefer to go with that.
I'd say you got $9,800 available to do some of this work at this time, and that we should wait till later to see if there's additional funds that would be required.
And Ron's.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm done.
Well, I would agree with what you just said, is we got some money available. My question is more of an extension of our agreement with the city parks. I mean, can we extend it unilaterally, or are they okay with an extension, or do we have to get a new one before they're ready to do anything more, or what?
I discussed with them that there's no way we could put a new plan on the table at our December meeting, and so that I was going to ask for an extension, and they were comfortable with that.
So they're okay with the extension of what
Right.
it says now?
Yeah.
Okay, that answer your question? So,
Well, I don't see anybody saying, yeah, let's go ahead and appropriate more funds, so I think I'll make my motion at this point in time
Okay.
that we go for a 1-year extension of the current plan with no additional funding.
Second.
seconded by Scott. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign, motion carries. Thank you, Dan. Okay, item number 13, a discussion on potential watershed improvements project, which Span's been talking about, in West Dakota area. And we have some guests here from South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources to participate in this discussion. Do you want to introduce it?
So I'll give a brief background. At our special meeting in November was attended by Chris Dozark and Paul Lorenzen from the, I'll just call it the watershed programs at DANR. And they gave a quick little 5-minute spiel, the gist of which was that they had interest in potentially trying to start some sort of a watershed improvement project Black Hills wide. It kind of piqued my interest. I talked with them at fair length after the meeting, and my comment to them at that time, the next round of applications, are they due at the end of September of the upcoming year?
October 1st, 2024, yep.
October 1, and my comment was I really doubted whether or not it'd be feasible to get an application in, just the number of partners that you'd have to line up around the Black Hills area. But I said, nonetheless, I'm interested in talking more, so we talked, the three of us, on a Zoom call a few weeks ago. Everything's been a few weeks ago. That was probably before West River Deer is how it would boil down. Anyhow, at that point in time, to keep the story short, I said kind of the same thing. I said, what would be the feasibility of, rather than Black Hills wide, looking at a project that would involve only the area for West Dakota Water Development District? And I said, for that we would need many less partners, and would be easier to get a project started. And typically these things go and go. Like the only other West River project is the Belle Fourche project, which is kind of focused on the irrigation areas, and it's grown from there. They do them by segment. The first segment is the first several years. There's typically, these things are a few years, whether 2 or 3, or they can get extended. And then you can go in for additional funding for an additional segment. They were just awarded again, what segment were they awarded for?
Belle Fourche came in for an amendment for segment 10.
So they've had 10 different funding iterations over the years, so they can grow. And what if it started in Pennington County could grow to encompass a larger area. And it turns out, in talking with Lindsay, the area for the Pennington Conservation District is the same as ours, only Pennington County west of the Cheyenne, correct? And then
Yeah, we're between the Wyoming border and the Cheyenne River
right.
in Boston.
And so that portion of Pennington County east of the Cheyenne is part of a different conservation district.
East Pennington, yeah.
Yep. And so then my other comment or question was, to what extent could such a project kind of fit in with one of the things we're doing now, a lot of this erosion control work? And as we talked about it, I guess it kind of, the terminology you guys sort of used is sediment removal or reduction type focus, and that seemed to grow some legs. So today we did a little field trip. Ron was going to attend but had a conflict come up, but Director Bierke and I, and so we looked at Star Village, and we looked at the Hillcrest areas, the hill just west of there on the west side of 5th Street. We went out and looked at the Spearfish Shale, some of the areas around the National Guard camp, and where we'd worked at Raider Park. We circled back. Well, we went past School of Mines. I showed them our little demo project there, and we looked at the erosive areas there. And then on the way back, we came down 5th and went on St. Pat, so we could see the south side of that hill and all the erosive areas. And then we went south on 79 down to past Black Gap and to Spring Creek Road and turned around, and I guess you live at Black Gap, correct?
I do.
Scott, so I guess there's a little bit of erosive country in there, or a lot, a lot of which in that area is in where the 79 road construction took place. So, I might bring in South Dakota DOT as a partner. So, I guess with that as background, I'll let these guys take it from there and tell you how these projects work and what they're thinking of.
All right, well, I'll kind of start, and Chris will kind of give you the greater details, but, so first off, my name is Paul Lorenzen, and I'm the administrator of the Watershed Protection Program at Department of Ag Natural Resources. We've been doing 319 projects for many years. We have right now 6 projects that are all mainly focused in East River, other than the Belle Fourche. And so we think one of them is the Big Sioux that Jay's is involved with, which encompasses almost the entire Big Sioux River Basin. The James River Basin is covered. And we got to thinking, man, we're doing a lot of stuff out east, so what about out west, and especially the Black Hills? So that's kind of what led us here. But we think big. These projects are large. And so when we came out, we just kind of threw out this, at the special meeting, just kind of, hey, how about a big old Black Hills project? And I think that Dan kind of helped us kind of, because it's just what we're used to. And I think by all means, it makes great sense to start small and then work from there. Because the Belle Fourche project itself, what is that, 20 years old or,
Probably, yeah.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. Most of those projects, the Big Sioux, a lot of them have been going for 20 years, and they started, smaller than they are today and then expanded. So I think one of the important things to keep in mind as you make decisions is that, it's flexible. We're flexible. We're coming to you and trying to decide what the needs are when it comes to improving water quality. I don't think that we should come in here and dictate. We're going to provide, what we can and can't do, guidelines, things like that, but it's really about what's important to Rapid Creek, to Pennington County, Conservation District, partners. That's what's important. So we'll try to provide as much feedback as we can in terms of what the funds can be spent on, how things generally work, provide that kind of guidance if this is something you're interested in. But it's really about, and I want to thank Dan and both Dans, I guess, for taking us out today, because we did look through Google Earth when we had the Teams meeting, and you could see some stuff, but it was pretty amazing once we got out there, especially what's the Star Village. I mean, it was the whole half that hillside. Not only was it eroding out, but you could see where it just would go right straight down the street and entered the city's storm sewer system. And I can't even imagine how many tons of sediment that was that eventually made its way into Rapid Creek. We focus, a lot of our projects are generally focused on impaired waters, but there's been a big push, and Chris will probably talk about this more, but there's been a big push for protecting and improving water quality. So that's another reason why I think that type of situation is a great place to start. So with that, I'll just kind of turn it over to Chris, and he'll kind of talk about the greater ins and outs of the 319 program.
Yeah, so Chris Dozark, I'm the 319 implementation coordinator under watershed protection. Just a little background on what 319 means. It's a part of it's a section of the Clean Water Act, which basically is dealing with non-point source pollution. So we're really not looking at fixing wastewater treatment plants or any of that. We're looking at these types of situations that you really can't point to, like, who's doing that. I mean, it's kind of a non-point source. He's not looking at a pipe. I guess one thing that I got to check on, and I'm 90% sure that these would qualify, is there are some issues with MS4s, and working with MS4s and 319. You can't use 319 funds to address an MS4 issue.
What's an MS4, Chris?
Municipal stormwater management.
It's a requirement that communities over a certain size have. And so it's a permit level situation rather than an all voluntary thing, which is historically what the non-point source stuff has been involved with.
So the city of Rapid City would be one, and Pennington County maybe too?
Yep.
Pennington County also.
Pennington County.
They both have stormwater management plans, but
Right.
I have a email out right now. I wrote this morning to EPA asking if these practices would qualify for 319, and I'm 90% sure that they probably would qualify because they are a non-point source issue.
Obviously, the city's not addressing them in their stormwater management plan. Is that, I mean, that's pretty clear to me.
One catch could be, I mean, you can point at them and say this is a point source, but
You can, but you can't point to any one given part of that hill and say, oh, it's coming from right there.
anyhow,
Piping it down.
right now we're optimistic.
Yeah.
Well, Rapid City would not really be eligible for these 319 funds, though, is that right?
They can do there is some flexibility to do some like urban BMPs and that type of stuff. You just can't address what's in the stormwater management plan with these funds.
Okay.
So like I said, I think I'm 90% sure that, working on these erosion areas and stuff would qualify for 319 because they are a non-point source issue. Just some background on kind of the process. So with 319 projects, there's a 60-40 kind of cost share a match requirement. So 319 gives 60%, and then it has to be matched with 40%. We talked about, if somebody was to donate the dirt for this dirt work, that would count as match towards the 319 funding side of things. Like Mr. Driscoll said, October 1st is the deadline for kind of the next go around for the non-point source funding round, and then that money probably wouldn't be available until probably May or June of 2025. So looking at this project, if you got an application in October 1st of 2024, you'd probably have money available May, June of 2025. And like Paul said, there's been kind of a push recently to kind of look at protection versus implementation of impaired waters. So that's kind of where our thought came with, this Big Black Hills deal, and then kind of narrowed it back into Rapid Creek. And West Dakota Water Development District's area.
Could I
Yes.
speak in?
Yes.
Yeah, and Jay Gilbertson, Chair of the State Task Force on Non-Point Source. Dan, I pulled up on the screen. These are a couple of pages out of the current, the 2022, what we call the integrated report. It lays out compliance, non-compliance, support, non-support of designated uses. And to Chris's point about protection, the lower box in the upper part there, that's the upper segment of Rapid Creek. I think there are 5 different segments. And what you see across in the middle is basically the latest available data says all of the designated uses are supported. And in fact, if you scroll down, Dan, please, segment 2, all the beneficial uses are supported. Segment 3, immersion and limited contact recreation, which is a bacteria thing. Otherwise, everything's supported. Ditto with segment 4. It's only down in segment 5, which is the, Farmington, above Farmingdale to the Cheyenne, that sediment comes into play. And that's driving the impairment for the warm water permanent fish life. That's a TSS thing. And so above Farmingdale, although clearly I've been to some of your sites, sediment is a potential big issue. That's not that's not yet translated into recognized impairments on the creek, at least not officially. But, yeah, it's way better to protect them than to have to fix them after they're broke.
Who determines that? Who actually determines that, where that fits?
That would be the Department of Ag and Natural Resources does the integrated report every 2 years. Paul actually
And you
wrote this.
sit on that committee?
No, I sit on the state non-point source task force. We spend all our time looking at this, and I
okay.
spend a lot of time fiddling around with it. But there's a procedure. You need so many samples in so many places and all this sort of stuff, and you basically get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Right now, other than the very lowest part of Rapid Creek, the big problem is E. coli.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, in most instances, and we've had this talk too, if you have nothing at all, or you're just below the threshold, and I use nitrates as the example for drinking water, 10 parts per million is the magic number.
Right.
You'd like non-detect. That's great. But from a technical standpoint, 9.9 is also okay, which is, it really isn't, but it's considered that. You go over it, 10.1 is bad, so is 100. And so even with this where it says, segment 5 or segment 3 isn't impaired, it might be headed in that direction due to the erosion that's taking place in town. And so slowing it down prevents it from being listed. And that's an emphasis that EPA and the state are now are moving toward, particularly in places like the Black Hills where a lot of the waters are pretty nice. It's easier to keep them that way than it is to fix Clear Lake or, some of those things back east.
So with the 319 funds, every year we pass through about $2 million. And just as an example, this year, last week, we had 2 applications that came in, just 2 for $2 million. The Belle Fourche River Watershed Project, again, it's an amendment to segment 10. They came in for $899,000, and we fully funded that. And then the South Central Watershed Project, which is sponsored by James River Water Development District, came in for $1.3 million. And they got the remaining balance, which was just over $1.2 million. And we get that every year. So, if you guys came in for a couple of years and like, man, this thing's really taken off like gangbusters, you can always come back in for an amendment. So, I mean, it's very flexible as far as practices go. The Belle Fourche does conversion from flood irrigation to sprinkler irrigation. East River, we fund water pipelines for livestock watering, egg waste systems, riparian buffers, grassed waterways, stream crossings. So I mean, it's a very flexible fund source. So I think this would be it'd be kind of new for us. We haven't really done a lot of this like sedimentation, erosion control stuff, but I think there's definitely other states in our region, Montana, kind of the one I'm thinking of, that have done similar practices and projects to this. So.
Is there a training program to fill out these applications that you put on?
It's not really training. I sent a couple of examples of, we call them PIPs, project implementation plans. They basically have to meet, there's 9 elements that EPA wants, which basically says what's the resource concern, where's it at, how much is it going to cost, when are you going to get it done, so there's like milestones, public information, that's one of them, and outreach. Most of these range probably 15 to 20 pages long, and that's including maps and budgets and milestones, which all take about a page. They're pretty cookie cutter at this point. Those couple I've sent to Dan, I think, probably around 20 pages. We'll work with you guys. You know, we can work with you guys to fill them out, make sure all the 9 key elements are in there.
You guys can assist in preparing them.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, that's kind of what I was asking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That sounds fairly similar to the CIS's too.
Yep. Yep.
So I think we just will wrap this in a little bit too with the conservation district. So if the project would meet also some of your interests, you know, you could partner with West Dakota and become part of that project as well, where you could obtain funding to do various things that you're looking to do, water quality related, things like that. I know you have a CIS project, that's not gonna last forever, but this project could last forever, I
Right,
guess you could say, or the hope would be, I guess,
Yeah.
So something to think about from the future, or if there are things that you wanna do that your CIS doesn't cover, you know, maybe the 319 part would cover. So it's almost like being part of this would be maybe potentially beneficial. Part of our program is also the Conservation Commission. So we like to work with conservation districts as much as possible.
Right.
And then there's those sort of funding sources there. I don't know if you guys put in for applications through the
We
commission.
have been in grants through them,
Okay,
which also improves water quality. so-
sure. So it's really kind of, I don't know, would fall under one big umbrella, which would be
Right.
beneficial, I think, to everybody.
So where does the money come from for these projects?
It comes from EPA. They have that funding source. Every state is awarded a certain amount based off of, there's a weird formula they use, but like I said, we actually receive about $2.8 million every year. We fund watershed protection through that funding source. We take about $700,000 or $800,000 of that to help fund our 14 full-time employees, and then we pass the rest of it through to just different projects. So, like Paul said, right now we have 6 active projects. All 6 of them have come in the last 2 years. They've been funded pretty well, but I'm sure more will come in next year. And it's just kind of a weird game that, you know, get some funding for a couple of years, do what you can do, come back in. Get some more money, hopefully put stuff on the ground, and just kind of circles like that.
Is that generally how long they are, about 2 years? Or
So most people come in they originally put in for like a 2 to 3 year project, and then a lot of them come in for an amendment, say the second year, and end up going 5 years. So it's generally from 2 to 5 years. And then what's required at the end is you have to write a final report with what you've done, what you spent, what went well, what didn't go well. Just kind of a typical, and we have examples of those and kind of work with projects with that as well, and getting those taken care of.
So one of our discussion items was that, you know, these programs typically have more flexibility than rigidity. So, I mean, we could basically prepare an application that would focus strictly on erosion control, or you can have it broader and allow many activities besides erosion control. It could start out that as a kind of a foundation stone, but it doesn't have to be restricted to that.
Yeah, so for example, one of our projects is the Soil Health Coalition has a project with us looking at soil health improvement and planning. So kind of their first segment was kind of like an information education project. So they ended up pushing out a bunch of educational information to people based, kind of looking at cover crops and reduced tillage, incorporating some livestock on stuff and how that affects not carbon sequestration, but carbon in the soil and improving basically water infiltration. So they come around for a second segment and we're like, all right, now we want you to put, practices on the ground. So we help fund essentially a lot of cover crop type practices. And now they're on their third segment, and they're kind of looking at, they're kind of expanding out a little more. We're helping maybe do some reduced tillage practices in the East River. A lot of cover crop stuff. They're actually working with the Belle Fourche on doing some cover crop stuff in the Belle Fourche. So yeah, it's very flexible.
So, we've got a lot of other agenda items
Yeah, we do.
here. I wonder, I guess my inclination might be to invite these folks back for January and talk about whether we might talk more about it. I mean, if we want to have other partners in place in time to put in an application, I mean, we can submit an application, but it's good if we have other potential partners in the mix. Would it make sense that we might invite other interested parties and have additional discussion at that point in time? And I think it'd probably help, the Conservation District meets next week, right, Lindsay?
Tomorrow.
Or tomorrow, okay, yeah, tomorrow.
It was supposed to be last week, but
Right,
Yeah.
right.
we had 2-6 supervisors, so.
So,
But I think, do you know Sean Fralin?
Yeah.
He's my chairman, so
Okay.
he wanted to be here tonight.
Sure.
He was busy doing something else.
Yeah, he's in the
But-
Soil Health Coalition.
Yeah, he's the chairman for that too, so.
Yep.
well, go ahead.
I guess, kind of like with our current CIS, we have Game Fish and Parks as a partner, we have NRCS, we have Pennington, Weed and Pest, we have the Soil Health Coalition. We have a lot of partners already that are wanting to work in that area, so I think it would be a pretty big hit. And we could probably get quite a few people here for the meeting.
Well, I guess the one thing I would ask is kind of a straw poll of the directors as to level of interest. Is this something we want to talk more about in January, or is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in favor of continuing the discussion with the DANR and even Bennington County Conservation District too, as a potential partner in something like this.
I thought it'd probably be a thumbs up.
How about everybody else?
Yeah.
Thumbs up? Thumbs up. Well, I guess
Thanks, guys.
we're ready to move on then, but thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Chris, Paul for coming out, and Dave for being here too.
Do we have a date? I think we have time on our side at this point.
Second
so that's
Tuesday.
good. I think we got time on our side at this point, so
Yeah.
more discussions we can
Second
have. the
Tuesday,
better.
second
Okay,
Tuesday.
So that-
okay. Yeah, thanks for coming out, and I guess we need to move on here.
And you're not tied to the rest of the meeting if you're wanting to get home sooner rather than later. It's not impolite to leave
Okay.
after
Yeah,
your
We
item
might
is
have
up.
to take you up on that.
Let's start early.
What's that?
Does that apply to me?
Yeah, you can leave the meeting at any time. I've done that.
All right, we'll move on to item 14, aquatic invasive species update from the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks. Ron, you want to introduce Jeremy?
Yeah, we've got Jeremy Keemster from Game and Fish, and he's gonna be talking about just basically an update on the management efforts on the AIS efforts in this area. And there's a handout that he'll be addressing on pages 20 and 21 of our packet. And then as it says there someplace, I think in that packet, we've helped them with their cost share funding to match their federal programs in the packet.
Thanks, have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Jay, you want to move that microphone over? No problem. Oh, okay, I guess we got it.
Well, yeah, so as Ron said, I'm Jeremy Kent, so I'm actually the area fisheries supervisor for the Rapid City area, and we cover the West River portion of South Dakota. I'm not the AIS director, but this kind of falls into some of my job duties. As Ron mentioned, the group here has been really generous over the past few years to offer up some funding that we could use as a match for federal funds to fully fund these programs. And so those primary funding mechanisms were a Bureau of Reclamation grant and then a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grant over the past couple of years. And those are 75-25 match. And so the $20,000 each year that this group sent our way was basically turned into $80,000. And those funds were used to fund in aquatic invasive species check stations, so boater checks at Pactola, Sheridan, and Deerfield reservoirs. So only the Pennington County reservoirs. And actually, Lindsay's here. She's the real hero of this program, at least in my mind, because we actually partner with the conservation districts, and they hire a bunch of the seasonal employees that do a lot of the check stations and stuff like that. So we're handling some of Pennington County, but the conservation districts, Butte County, Pennington County, all those different. Yep. So one of the things that's in the handout here, you can kind of look at the numbers of the inspections, but as you can see from those numbers, most of the bulk of the total inspections for the year are happening in our western South Dakota waters, Angostura, Pactola, Deerfield, Belle Fourche. And these are, our efforts, we can't be at every boat launch in western South Dakota, and so we're really focusing our efforts on our highest use waters. And so that's why you see Angostura, Pactola, those are the ramps that we're spending most of our time at. As of today, we haven't seen any spread of zebra mussels past Pactola in western South Dakota. And our effort really is it's an educational standpoint, educating boaters when they come and go from these waters to clean, drain, and dry their boats. And that's the best way to prevent the spread, or at least slow the spread of these invasive mussels. With that, I'll take as many questions as you guys want, and I can provide other information as you'd like.
What's your program for next year then?
So at least as of right now, my understanding is that there'll be no change. Well, I shouldn't say that. As I understand it, I think that we're going to pull back the Deerfield station. So if you look, like Pactola and Sheridan, we did, 4,800 roughly inspections at those two reservoirs, and we did 126 at Deerfield. And that's mostly a result of Deerfield is a no-wake lake, and so it gets far less boater traffic than our other reservoirs. And so a cost benefit, to spend the staff time for 126 inspections just really isn't there. So I think that they were in discussions about pulling that one back and not doing an inspection station there. And so for Pennington County, that would mean that we would just be focusing on Pactola and Sheridan. So.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think that the program will relatively stay similar. I know that there is some different funding sources this year, and I don't have all the full details of it. I've heard that it may be 100% match rather than the 75-25 that it's been in the past. And then so there could be some funding changes there.
Are you planning on coming back to us for additional funds for this, for 2024?
I hope I'm not. No, I don't. I'm not sure. I asked Jake if we were going to be, and he wasn't sure.
Okay.
So I don't have a full answer for that one.
Does anybody have questions for Jeremy? Hey, Jay?
Mr. Chair, Jeremy, I'm looking at the 23 numbers and, Fort De Pere will say it's middle of the state, but, Webster and Sioux Falls are sort of the two easterns, and they're at about 4,000 total for the year. You've got almost that much in Angostura plus Pectola. Why the the huge disparity between East River and West River?
Good question.
They're obviously, a little bigger lakes out here, but there are far fewer and a lot more development around the eastern lakes, but it doesn't appear there's nearly as much inspection work taking place.
Yeah, so I'd say, one, I'm a fisheries supervisor, not an AIS supervisor, so I don't have the full understanding, but I think that I could touch on it a little bit. So if you look at states to the east, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, some of these that zebra mussels have been part of their life for a number of years now. As infestations increase, I guess prevention measures start to decrease, and that's just a natural artifact of the way that these organisms work. Once they're into a water body, there's really no eradication, and so I think that's where we're at East River. East River, South Dakota, there's quite a few bodies of water that are now infested with zebra mussels, and so I think that as the infestation has basically spread pretty widespread over in the eastern part of the state, the focus from a prevention standpoint or slowing the spread has shifted west, and so more inspectors at ramps. We're covering more ramps with more inspectors, so I would say that's why the numbers are higher out west.
Given that, wouldn't you want to increase efforts to protect Deerfield? It's not yet infested?
I mean, I guess when you look at the vectors for infestation, boats are the number one thing that we have any control over, and so that's where I say when we've got staff at the ramps there to only check 126 boats over the course of an entire summer, you have to weigh that cost benefit.
If you have a lake that's already infested and there's no eradication, why worry about continuing to inspect at all?
With Pactola?
Any lake.
Well, for Pactola specifically, the inspection on Pactola is not an entrance inspection, it's an exit inspection. And so at most of our waters, we're, in uninfested water, a boat comes and we check it to make sure that they're not bringing in mussels. On Pactola, we're inspecting that boat to make sure they're not taking it somewhere else. And so that's the primary reason that we're operating at Pactola.
Okay, any more questions? Yeah, appreciate the update.
Yeah, and thank you guys.
All right, moves us to number 15, additional fee for the grant preparation from Bar Engineering, submittal to the Bureau of Reclamation.
Well, I think we reorganized these, so I'm gonna give an update on the Water Smart grant. Before we talk about the bills that are associated with that. So, I'm not gonna go back in time to the full history of it, but we voted as a board to make an application for a Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart grant to do hydrology and reservoir and routing modeling on the Pactola Deerfield systems. Because we think that there can be a better job done on the water management there, and we can find some water that's now being spilled, and we can maybe do a better job of providing winter flows if we have some different tools available than we have right now, which are pretty simple tools. They're basically spreadsheet efforts that don't have a lot of power to them. They're more observational than anything else. And we were kind of encouraged by that with a previous project we funded for a School of Mines master's thesis that indicated that there could be some better things done. So we took that and ran with it. So middle of October, we were successful in submitting a water application to the Bureau of Reclamation. It's a competitive grant. We asked for a 75% cost share on the grant. It's either 75% or 50% cost share. We based our request on the fact that we highlighted the environmental benefits of better management for the stream segments between Deerfield and Pactola, and from Pactola downstream. So essentially Castle and Rapid Creeks would benefit greatly from better water management and better winter flow regimes that might be accomplished through, this water management tool. So we asked for 75% grant. I think our total grant amount ended up to be somewhere north of $300,000. When we had Bar Engineering prepare a scope of work for us, they came up with about $250,000 roughly. I think we ended up a little higher than that because of some specialty software people that likely would be involved for one of the models. When we ended up running our program through the Bureau of Reclamation for a review, they added a flat $100,000 to that scope of work. So we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, attempting to work with them locally and out of Dakota's area's office to reduce that Bureau of Reclamation scope of work, and we were unsuccessful in doing that. So in the end, we just put their budget in there as part of our grant application, and if we're successful, we figure that we're going to be doing some negotiating with them, because as the directors that were really involved with this, particularly Craig and myself and Dan, we think that the Bureau didn't exactly scope their work properly. They had a lot of resource people in there doing reviews when this is strictly a modeling project. So I think we have some ability to potentially negotiate with them if we're successful. So that's in. Sometime between now and April, we're supposed to hear on the success of that grant. It's competitive. It's, I think it's $5 million in 17 western states, and the maximum grant amount per project is $500,000, if I remember right. I'm kind of going from memory, but I did this for so intense for so while that I kind of remember.
I think it was 400,000.
400? Okay, I missed by 100 grand. Okay. Anyway, it's in that range in terms of the maximum grant amount, and we're under the ceiling, for that request. So the grant application itself, I think Dan has it posted on our website. Is that correct? If not,
Not real, no.
it's okay. It's available to any director, but it's kind of long-winded, so we didn't want to kill a whole bunch of trees putting it into the packet all along. But it is available. Dan can email it to you if you want to go through it and look at it in detail about what what we put forward and what we asked for and the benefits that we hope to accrue from some better modeling. So before I go to the next thing that's sort of, well, both things are both tied together, are there any general questions on the update on the grant submittal?
Basically, we're at $300,000, give or take, below the maximum. We should know between now and April whether we're successful or not.
Yeah. Yep. And it was sort of it was going along really well, and then we tried to hit the submit button. And so that's where the next costs come into play. BAR overran their approved budget of $7,500 by $1,000. They spent some additional time essentially working to try and get the grant submitted. The reason why they had trouble getting the grant submitted is related to the bill that we got from H2E. When H2E was the administrator for West Dakota, they were released on fairly short notice and apparently did not get all the I's dotted and T's crossed before they left. So some of the two-factor authentication elements that were necessary to fulfill to submit the grant through the grants.gov website, we still resided with Emily Martinez, who was the previous lead administrator for H2E. So we ended up making some last-ditch efforts trying to find cell phone numbers, and it was quite a cluster of feathers in the air at the last minute. But we did accomplish it, and so BAR went over their amount by $1,000, and we got a bill from H2E for 2 hours of time for the work that I guess I thought maybe should have been done before H2E left, is transfer all that information to Dan as our new administrator. But that's kind of the long and the short of those three items. So I guess, I'm not sure, but I think that we probably owe, some additional money to BAR because of the time they spent trying to get it submitted. It was essentially 5 hours. And they were billing us on an hourly basis. And then we owe, I guess, potentially some money to H2E because they failed to get everything transferred over before we wanted to try and use it. So I'll make a motion to pay the current invoice from BAR Engineering, which is on page 23 of our packet, for the amount of $3,600, or $3,615.50 for final submittal of our WaterSmart grant.
Second.
Seconded by Driscoll. Discussion on the motion.
How does this fit in with what's already been, I mean, the $2,577 that we approved on this, and the $100,000 for the grant application? I mean, this is in excess of that? I don't understand.
We approved a $7,500 contract with BAR to have them help us prepare the grant application, and they ran over their amount by $1,000 essentially, directly related to the difficulties that we had getting it actually submitted. It was like 4 hours or 4.5 hours over.
So that previous amount for $2,600 is part of that $7,500?
Yes.
Oh, the bill that we paid for BAR some time ago.
It was 26.
It was 4,900 or something. Anyway, it was the total of their two invoices. We've received two invoices from them, and the total is like $8,500 versus $7,500, which is $1,000 over what we approved.
Right.
Yeah.
But take a look at the treasurer's report on page 11.
Okay.
In 2023 projects, there's an amount that we paid for $7,500.
That's what we authorized.
Okay,
And they went over.
That's-
Our first invoice was $49,2250.
yes.
Okay, and so, you know, we had a
So this
balance.
is what we're asking for now, basically is $1,000 increase
Yeah,
from what was budgeted, given that 2577 still remains.
That's
correct,
correct.
correct, yep. We're paying for about 4 more hours worth of work. Because they couldn't get, they just barely got it submitted. It was a late night deal. Craig can attest to the late night factor on it if you want a story.
We had to be done by, what, 10
Midnight.
o'clock our time?
10 o'clock our time.
And I think they just barely made it.
And basically all of that is because of, what, H2, whatever their end name is.
We were unable to actually access the portal because we had no way to do the two-factor authentication until we found Emily and had her interface with us with the helpline on grants.gov over on the eastern part of the state, or the country, to get it actually submitted. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got our grants submitted in time. So it was quite a run for the roses there the last 5-6 hours.
I'm gonna speak to H2S and what happened as far as their
So
administrative.
are we essentially saying that we'll pay BAR another $1,000 because the submittal process was more difficult than anticipated in the original contract because of H2Es not cleaning things up before they left?
It was a result of the fact that we couldn't actually just go ahead and submit it. We did not have any way to access the account that was associated with West Dakota until we were able to track Emily Martinez down and have her give us the code, you know, basically for that two-factor authentication that comes to her cell phone. So we were stuck. Yeah, BAR couldn't do their submittal as planned because it was blocked by the two-factor authentication.
I personally don't feel like blaming H2E. I recall the circumstances under which they left.
I was gonna speak to
I-
that too, because I was there when it happened.
These things can happen, so I
Yeah,
really don't
they were not treated very well.
Right,
by
I really
our
don't
board
like
at
to
the
see
time.
him, necessarily want to see him badmouthed by
I don't
our
either.
group, so.
I
Anyhow, there was a situation there and it's been resolved and, you know, we could blame ourselves. And I mean, I know that there were a lot of difficulties with reclamation and everyone wanted to submit this long before the date of the deadline. So anyhow, I just say let's not play the blame game and let's move on to voting.
Well, the motion now is just on the BAR
Right.
increase of $1,000 over the original contract. And is there a motion there?
I made a motion,
You moved,
I
I
think
seconded.
Dan seconded it.
Okay, so
So then we were discussing what some of the Scott's
what
questions.
is it? What do you have there for?
Well, I
motion?
wanna see, I wrote in the motion, the invoice is for $36,1550, but that includes some of the already approved work, so I said 36,15.50, which includes grant prep from BAR, 325 and submittal work. So this, it's not 36, we might want to reword this, but.
Right.
So that's our
I
invoice.
think the motion is that we need to approve increasing their contract from $7,500 to $8,500, whatever that dollar amount is.
Well, we have to do the math, and this is just, it's just easier to pay this invoice.
Yeah, if you could just tell me to pay this invoice, that
Page 23.
I
covers the $1,000.
I think we need to put in an amendment to that agreement that we're changing the dollar amount.
Well, then we gotta do the math.
Then do the math.
1,038.
1,000. I think that should be the motion, and then
Okay.
the board would act on that, and then you have authority then to approve that yourself then, as far as,
1,038.
I'm not sure. that's
So
1,038.
I guess
what is it?
if Coth wants to amend it in that fashion, I'm cozy with it.
What is
That's
it?
the board's preference.
I think it's only 938.
I'd rather just pay the invoice.
Is it 938 or 1,038?
Okay, we can add it up after the fact.
Yeah.
It's
That-
in the motion though.
It's 1,000.
Well, if we approve the contract, we don't need to make a motion on paying the invoice, because they have an agreement then to pay it, that total amount. We don't need to have that in there. That's my opinion.
Are we amending the motion? or-
No,
Changing the motion?
we just changed, it just got reworded.
Do we have the right math then, Ron?
I'm looking.
Okay. You know how engineers are, Dennis.
Yes, I know. So I have motion by Coe, seconded by Driscoll to pay an additional
1,038.
1,038, which includes grant from VAR to filing/submittal work.
Yes. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Hold same sign, motion carries. Huh?
Aye.
One
One opposed.
opposed from Scott.
So then we kind of talked about this in context of how these extra bills came about, so I'll make a motion to pay the $320 invoice from H2E for their assistance with our most recent grant submittal for the Water Smart grant.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Driscoll. Discussion on the motion.
Was anybody involved in that on their behalf other than Emily? So this is basically a bill from Emily.
Essentially, it's for 2 hours of her time.
Yes.
Chris Eworth, the president or head of the company, sent the invoice, and I emailed him and asked him to make sure this was correct for the amount of time, and he said, yes, it is correct.
Okay.
Explain to me what happened when they left.
Well, it was a different board, and there were certain members of that board that were not very polite to that company,
They just kicked them out.
basically. They just went out the door. So I could see how things got to this position, not having everything taken care of, which probably, I agree with Ron, should have been, but under the circumstances, it was not pleasant for what happened.
It's easy to have an oversight like that. I don't know that I would think, well, I need to pass along.
Not when they're going out the
Whatever.
door. They were there too.
Yeah, I wasn't on the board. They did the change, and then they put me on the board as a fill-in. But the transition between Dan and them were like 25 days, if that. And under the previous contract, they were only supposed to be in the office, 8 hours a week?
Yeah.
And there was really no love lost between both parties and the board. It was very contentious, even on arguments of parliamentary or even procedure.
What were they doing for us?
They were doing
Dan's
Dan's
job.
job.
Oh,
They were administrative. And quite honestly, after the fact that when Dan came on, there were questions that came up. They just left in a hurry, and there was communications back and forth that they never charged us for. So I agree. I think we should pay the $320 and move on. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
aye.
Pull the same sign.
No,
One no from Ron.
Who's the second?
I second.
Driscoll.
That was my second. Second consecutive second.
All right.
I'll explain my no vote.
Please.
I used to work with Miguel when I worked for Bar, and I made some inquiries as to the actual time expended. He said it was about 30 minutes at the most. At the most.
Well,
Yeah.
padded bills are not unusual.
Especially from attorneys, right?
Yeah.
Okay, where are we now? Is that number 17?
17.
Discuss the upcoming election cycle for directors.
It's like one of the few things I actually talk about at these meetings. This is just a friendly reminder for directors in 2, 4, 6, and 8. at the end of 2024. Your term is up. Also, to let you know that if you would like to continue to run for this board, you can pick up a nominating petition no sooner than January 1st of 2024 to run for your current spot. Now, Jay Gilbertson always has a joke that if you are not interested in running, you should be circulating the petition of the person you want to fill into your spot. Not saying that you have to do that, but that's just kind of the joke with how many people run for water board. And so just wanted to let everybody know, and just to kind of give a heads up, because we've had, like as we talked in the previous agenda item, that this board has been kind of a interesting bunch in the last couple of years, and I just want to make everyone aware.
Thank you, Thomas, appreciate it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you can actually get the petition before January, you just don't date it, don't do anything before January.
Okay,
So,
thank you for
if it's on
that.
the Secretary of State site or the county auditor probably has them.
Okay, item 18 is the discussion and action on an item to start the process for a new administrator when the current contract for Dan is up in August of 2024.
It's also me. So just, it's been almost a yearly thing for 4 years straight that I have started this item to look at a possible update of the administration contract. Dan is with us until August of 2024. Since we have a little bit more time, instead of 2 meetings before we agreed to a contract, I am asking the chair to help form a committee to look at the need of the administrator and to see what options, kind of do a broad scope, because originally we were going to have the Black Hills Council of Local Governments fill in. That fell through right at the 11th hour, and Dan was so gracious to actually come in and work another year. So I want to request to form a committee to look at all our options, have a discussion, and see if we can have a long-term fix where this does not become a yearly thing for me, where I announce that we are setting up a committee to try to find an admin. So my
Okay.
request is if a committee could be formed.
So since you...
I'm volunteering because it is
Okay,
my item,
we
so
got
I'll
one.
chair.
We can have 3 more. I'll say a committee of 4.
I'll stay on the
Ron's
thing.
on it. Any other volunteers?
I'd volunteer.
Craig? You get one more?
A lot of hands, kind of.
Yeah, I will.
And Scott, good, thank you very much. Did you get that, Dan?
No idea, could you repeat that, Mac?
Mac,
Code,
Coth,
Carr,
Care,
Care.
and McGregor. Thank you for doing that. And you can be the chair of the committee.
I figured since that's how it always works. Gives me something to do as the vice chair.
Okay, very good. So down to item 19, chair's comments. I'm gonna announce I'm not planning to run again for another term. This is my second term I'm on, so I will not be running from area number 2 for 2024, 25. That's all I have.
So have you found your successor? That's going to be the next question.
Well, as we sit here tonight, I don't, but I will definitely, hopefully be involved and find somebody from
Driscoll
area.
can help, he's good at that.
Well,
Yeah.
so yes, if I can be an assistant in getting somebody to replace me, I'd be glad to do it.
That doesn't prevent you from being chair in 2024 if we should decide that we would like you to keep doing that, however.
Yeah, he could be chair technically next year if we do an election of officers, so.
Unless you want to get rid of me.
Nothing technical about it.
Yeah.
Fully
I was thinking more of punishing you, but
Are there any items from other directors?
I have one.
Yeah.
This is directly related to the previous announcement from Mr. Bierke, is that we need to put considerable pressure on him to reconsider his announcement.
Well, I'm 75 years old. I'll be 76 when I finish. And I have been on this board for 8 years. So,
80's a nice round number.
It's not even 10%.
well, I appreciate your thought, Ron, and, no, I pretty much decided to do it. I got off the HOA board last June. I've been on that.
And one left. That's
And I'm
this
gonna
one.
be off the president of the Black Hills Runners Club in just about 3 weeks. So I'm thinning this stuff out.
It's never good to quit cold turkey.
Yeah, okay, is there any other positive comments from other directors?
Well, I won't be here next year, after March or April maybe.
Well, you better get to work then.
Yeah.
Well,
don't
we
know
kinda
any-
knew that, because I know you're moving.
Yeah, I don't know anybody in my area wants it though, right offhand. So I don't know, I'll have to do some looking, I guess.
Yeah, we were aware of that, because you.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
And
there
sir-
will be a vacancy then.
yeah, there'll be a
Very
vacancy
possible.
for Dennis, possibly in the spring, you said,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Cheryl?
And in 6, I'm not gonna be running, but I think I found somebody that would be excellent. And I asked him, Dr. William Young,
Yeah.
so keeping my fingers crossed that he says, yeah, okay, I think do that. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
So if you hear from him, Dan,
Sure.
William
Well,
Young, yeah,
Yeah, I'll know. Okay.
yep. Hopefully.
Mr. Driscoll?
I'm not gonna run next year.
Luckily, you're in Area 3, so you
Can't run.
I'm kinda looking at you,
But-
I'm looking at you cross-eyed.
But I am going to suggest that the board procure the voter lists for these areas, and we probably just will procure them for all 4 of the even areas because of redistricting. I've purchased many of them in the past to go out and look for directors, and I don't think it should fall on my pocketbook this time around. I think that way we can have them available to the directors and we can all be shaking the tree. I guess we referred to some of these previous circumstances with administrators and the boards, and this board kind of got into that situation. It wasn't an accident how it happened, and it really was kind of an accident how we got out of it. You know, it turned out that there were out of 5 odd-numbered areas, 4 of them were up for election. Tom Mack, Tom was up. There was no election. There was no candidate there, and the other 4 positions, one was myself and Koth and Linda Harris, and then Steve Rollinger. But it was kind of by the grace of God that all of a sudden we had candidates at the right time, and it makes a difference. So, is there any reason the board cannot secure those voter lists? We've got redistricting. My old lists are no good anymore, and of course people move. Is there any reason we can't just do that?
What's the cost?
They're like $75 each, and then you can get like 4 for $200 or something. I think you can. There's some threshold you can get all of them. They just pull the whole water development district, but it's nominal.
Are you talking about for the 9 areas,
Well,
or just the ones that were up for re-election?
especially all 3, and really no reason not to get the 4th as long as we're doing it that way. The cost is very nominal. It's something under
It's up to the
$100.
board if they want to do that.
I thought I bought one for like $25. Maybe the cost went up.
Paper went up probably.
It's more than $25.
And you get it from the Secretary of State? Or from the county?
From the county.
The county has
The
to.
county.
You ask for it through the county, and
Oh,
the
okay.
Secretary of State provides it, or I don't. Anyhow, you talk to the auditor.
You know something about it, Dan?
Well, maybe I'm trying to remember now, because when we do a vacancy, I have to verify the people. Whereas an election, I'm really out of the picture. So when we had the vacancy, I don't remember it was Rollinger or who it was, but,
Yeah, it would have been probably
I went to
relative.
the county, and they basically just provided me with the
They did it for
list I
free.
needed to verify. Basically, yeah, so, I'm just wondering, why do we need this list?
So that we can look at the list and find people who might be interested. That's, for
That's
instance,
living
how,
in that district,
that's how Mr. Care's name came up, as we bought the list, and I bought the list and found his name, you know. Dennis, I knew Dennis from across the street and twisted his arm, but I'd say request that maybe they'll give them to you for free. There's
I could ask.
no reason why not.
I'd say we ask, if you wanted to.
Especially since they redistricted.
Yeah, if not, turn in a bill.
Yeah, we're paying for those people down there anyway, aren't we? The taxes?
Well, we're all paying for them.
Yeah, so it's
We pay about $5 to $10 each for
public.
water
it's
board.
public information.
Well, that's a standard thing that they charge for it, but
Yeah.
I'd say let's,
Maybe you could do that, yeah.
Yeah, they would, sometimes they say, well, this took 2 hours of my work, it's gonna cost you this much.
they have a flat fee. It's a flat fee.
Okay,
It's a flat fee up front. If I request the list, it's a flat fee up front.
I'll check on it, I don't know too much about what they're gonna say, but.
I'd say I don't know that we can vote on it since we didn't have it as an agenda item, but if we have to get charged, I don't think we need to vote to be able to do that. But I'd say if there's gonna be a charge, then let's get the three where the directors have
I
announced
still
their
have that list you give me, but then that's 3 years old
I would
too.
say-
It's worthless. It's
Yeah,
been
So this
redistricted.
district
Next
changed,
meeting.
right?
Pardon me?
If we can get them, those lists
Yeah,
by the next
I'll
meeting.
check,
Just see what,
she'll either say,
yeah,
yeah,
and
it's free, or you gotta pay for it.
then we could bring it up at the next meeting. Just middle of
We
January.
really don't want to wait till January to find candidates for March.
No, I agree, it's not on the agenda, so I don't think we can take action.
If you have people that are interested, they can go to the Secretary of State portal, and it'll tell them what area they're in.
Okay, let's do this. If they're not free, I'll pay for them, and then we can vote on whether or not I get reimbursed.
I second that.
Sorry, no.
I don't think we need to vote on it.
I don't think so. It's not a big bill, he can just do it.
You can't vote on it, but if there's gonna be a fee, you let me know, and I'll write them the check, and then I can ask for reimbursement at the next meeting.
That'll work.
But
Sounds good.
I want that list sooner rather than later.
All right.
You know, we
Excellent.
need directors that are here for the right reason. We need to fill them.
Any other items from directors?
God, that lets me out if I'm supposed to be here for the right reason.
We'll move on to the items from the administrator.
You have to wait 2 years to resign too.
Okay, I think Glenn left. I'm just telling you what he said. Called about a fence that was put along the St. Germain irrigation ditch. I guess he has alpacas or something, or
Yeah.
he did talk to
I
Dr.
talked to
McGregor, so if you want to jump in, that's fine. But his concern is that debris will accumulate along the fence, cause water to back up and flow into his property. And he had questions as to whether that was a right-of-way or an easement, so I will defer to Director McGregor.
I've talked to him there, because I didn't even know if there was such a thing as a St. Germain irrigation ditch, but apparently last year there was litigation over it, and it was determined that whoever's running the ditch, it's not an easement, that they actually owned it, so he got concerned because they put up a fence that he is concerned about, flooding his property with. But I can tell you that he's been in touch with county planning and zoning people, and they've been out to talk to him. So I told him that I really didn't think there was anything we could do about it.
There isn't.
We've got no dog in that fight.
Gave him a
There's nothing
little
we can do about it.
gratuitous legal
If
advice.
they went to the county, I think that's the right direction. they should
Yeah,
go.
so I think that's as far as we're concerned, I think he's taken
Yeah,
care of.
that's kind of what I told them. We try to help them, but we can't do anything. You know. So anyway, went to EPA, well, it was a PFAS meeting regarding the Ellsworth Superfund cleanup at the county administration building. Excuse me. Travis Lassiter was hosting it. And it was mainly discussions on how it was open to the public. A lot of people that were affected by the PFAS contamination were there. And there was somebody from the EPA and then Rita from Ellsworth Authority, I guess. So the discussion was just answering questions and how best to communicate between the different government entities involved and the people out there. But one important thing is the EPA threshold. I think it's around 70 parts per trillion or something. I don't know exactly, but they said that's probably going to drop down to 7. So things are going to get, so that's a factor of 10. More difficulty in cleaning up or dealing with the problem. This other item, there's a site called sam.gov, and it kind of ties into the same thing as when H2E left. I'm trying to get in there and straighten out the information on our mailing address, and I won't go into details, but Amy at Black Hills Council of Local Governments is helping me out quite a bit on that one. She knows how to navigate these government sites. So shouldn't be any problem. If we didn't fix it and we got this grant, they would not give us any money until we fixed it. So I'm working on fixing it, and hopefully in a week or so I'll have it fixed. See if there's much else here.
What, I saw you said you'll have it fixed, but you also said maybe we need an alternate person.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, if
Good.
Melissa had
Thank you for catching that.
been gone, like.
So if I leave, we don't want to have the same issue, other than, I'd just help you out if I could anyway, but we probably should have an alternate person on there, and maybe even on the grants. There's another site called grants.gov. So I'm not sure if we want to decide that now, but it might be a good idea to have people thinking about it. So that if I left, that alternate could log into the site.
Are you suggesting?
Because if I tried to log in right now, Emily's telephone would ring probably and give her an authentication code. We don't want to do that.
No.
How about Thomas? Would you be? What about Thomas?
Yeah, Thomas, you want to be in holder?
Sure.
Tom, put down Thomas.
Okay,
Good idea.
excellent idea. Okay, so.
That was easy.
I think we're playing the age card a little bit here, thinking that I'll be the one that will
I already know I'm 75.
You'll be the next James Overton.
Do you know, Dan, do you know how many signatures are required on a nomination petition to score on?
25.
25.
But you need to get more than that.
Yeah, because some
You
of
know,
them might
Because
not.
some might not be.
Yeah, you need to be 35 before.
You can easily get 50.
Yeah.
Make sure all your dates are right and everything,
Mm-hmm.
or they might throw the whole thing out. That happened to my wife. She dated, even though she didn't collect signatures, the petition was dated before January 1st.
Oh.
She had to
Jeez.
start over.
So that's why you know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard about it.
You heard about it.
So next month, we're gonna have election of officers, meeting schedule. We have this room for January reserved now, but for the rest of the year, we'll have to decide on that.
Our next meeting's January 9th,
Yeah. And then official newspapers.
same day of legislature.
Oh, yeah.
So backing up here then,
Yeah.
if you're legislative day, I don't know if we want to turn it over to Jay.
Yeah, sure can.
What's the one about the sales tax exemption updating or changing?
That was another problem with things that are not updated, but I can handle that. I already did that.
Okay, I thought maybe
Yeah,
there.
they had the wrong address down, and that caused problems with SAM.gov, and then our bank.
Fine, I thought maybe something
Yeah,
changed since
our
I
bank
used it.
used our PO box, and the government didn't like that, so I had to have our address changed to our physical address on that, so there were a lot of little things that just kept popping up, and it's kind of a whack-a-mole game.
Jay, you want to have the floor?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'll go quickly because it's after 5. Or 6, where, you know, the good people are from. But anyway, as noted up there, item 5 on Dan's report, legislative day. Yeah, all of you, I think, were given a letter with, or a note with our letterhead on it, kind of spelling out activities. As I said, for a number of years, both the James River and East Dakota boards have held their meetings in Pier on the second day of session, the first Wednesday of session, whatever you want to call it. And we will continue to do that. The schedule of activities is laid out on the letter. As has been noted, session opens the prior day, Tuesday the 9th. There are a couple of things going on. On Wednesday, there's a breakfast with the water development districts that, unfortunately for you guys, will be early in the morning the day after your 9th meeting, but there you go. I'd make Dan come out anyway. Anyway, that'll be up in the lobby, both the president's speaker's lobby, you know, coffee and rolls for the legislators. 10 o'clock that morning over at the meeting room at the Fort Pier Holiday Inn and Suite, or Holiday Inn Express. The James River Water Development District will have their board meeting wrapping up about 11:30. When we have a soup and sandwich lunch, everybody's invited. 1 o'clock, my board will meet. We'll wrap up about 2:30, and then you can move on to other activities if you want, or head home related to the Rural Water Annual Technical Conference that's going on. I think what I was going to say. At the James River Board meeting, well, for both of them, outside of the bare minimal business we have to conduct, what we try and do is bring in folks to talk about things that would be of interest to everybody, not just East Dakota or James River. I don't recall exactly who Dave's got lined up yet. In the afternoon, we're going to have Kevin Christensen, who works with South Dakota Rural Water Association, is going to talk about their source water and well protection efforts, particularly with downhole, basically a borehole camera that we bought for them last year, and some of the cool stuff they can do with that. He'll have some video going there. And then, and again, I don't know if Dan, how your timing, the legislature, the e-board for the legislature back in April requested an issue memorandum on water use in the Missouri River, and with a particular emphasis on could somebody come and take it out of state. And that memorandum was released on 7th or 8th of November. I forwarded a copy to Dan, or I sent that out.
Yeah.
Anyway, the young woman who wrote that memo, which I thought was really quite good for an attorney who didn't have any background in the subject matter. Anyway, Anna is going to be at our board meeting, and I've asked her to give that talk, kind of a lay talk to a lay board, rather than listening to me all the time. So we'll see. And you're all welcome to come over. And again, it's the day after your January meeting, but if you don't try and get there in time for the coffee and rolls, it's not so bad.
I will just tell the boards that I did go to 2 of those in my term, and it's both James Valley and East Dakota. I mean, your programs were very informative, and you get to meet a lot of new people that are in the same business as we are. So if you haven't gone to one, I'd highly recommend it.
Thank you. Very good. And then just to fill in a little gap here, I'm an administrator too, so I can talk. There will at this point be at least 2 pieces of legislation introduced dealing with water development districts, neither of which will have any impact on West Dakota. One is completing the expansion, or at least the relative expansion of the Vermilion Basin Water Development District. Historically, it was Clay and Turner counties. Last fall, McCook voted to join Vermilion Basin, so now it's Clay, Turner, and McCook. And the first piece of legislation would basically pull the western part of East Dakota out of East Dakota, most of Kingsbury, East Affa Minor, 5 townships and Lake, and put them into Vermilion Basin. And what you'll end up with then is the Vermilion Basin Water Development District will in fact be the Vermilion Basin Water Development District. It's a pretty good territorial loss for us. Population-wise, the city has already grown all the people we're gonna miss and then some. And with growth in Sioux Falls, like here in Rapid, I'm sure we'll recover the hit in about a year's time. And
So you in favor of the legislation?
Yeah, we've been promoting this for a long time. My board's behind it. We've got the county commissioners in the 3 counties of ours understand that it's important to do it. They've all been part of East Dakota since forever. And so that is changing, and I assured them that if they call, we will answer. Lake will still remain largely in East Dakota. At least a piece of Kingsbury will remain in East Dakota, and Minor County would work out there as well. There you go, Dan's pulling up the little map that's out of date. So there's McCook, and basically, yeah, McCook County is green now, and Kingsbury, Minor, and a little bit of Lake will be green if we are successful in getting that done. The other legislation that we're putting together deals with the director numbers, which again will have no impact on either you folks or us, but for Vermilion Basin because of the expansion, or Central Plains because of population increases, they have both gone over the threshold that they should have 7 directors now instead of 5. With water development districts, it's a little idiosyncrasy. 25,000 or fewer, 5 directors. 25,001 to 75, you get 7. Over 75,000, you have 9. You're way over 9. You're over 75. We are way over 75. They're making the switch. The difficulty we run into is there's no mechanism for a timely filling of that newly created director seat. You end up having, at the very least, waiting until the next general election. In the case of McCook County and the Vermilion Basin District, because of when they got in, they will be paying taxes to the Water Development District at least a year before they have an actual seated representative on the board. And I recall from school that, taxation without representation is dim view sort of thing.
Well, they need to go dump some tea in the lake.
Well, we can go dump some tea in the lake. They're dealing with that right now, but I've been working with LRC for about the last year. The new Secretary of State hasn't helped, but that's all right. What we're likely to do is a newly created director position as a result of these population shifts. We're going to declare as officially vacant, in the same sense that one of you, Dan, succumbs to his old age next week. You have a vacancy. That qualifies. Yeah, thanks, not being here anymore qualifies. But there's a process. It wasn't necessarily that, Dan. There's an answer.
Looking over there.
Yeah, I was looking over there. But there you go. But anyway, there's a process by which a vacancy on our boards can be easily filled. Okay, and so we're just gonna right now at the new 6 and new 7 for both of those districts. It's a train wreck, and so we're gonna fix it by calling it a vacancy, and that seems to be an acceptable deal. We've got sponsors lined up for both bills, so I think we're in good shape on that.
So you're not changing the definition of vacancy, you're just
We're gonna add, if you look at 46A 3B-9, there are about 7 different things that qualify as a vacancy. We're gonna add 1 more. And then go from there.
So it looks like we might end up being the smallest in area now.
Aerially, yeah, you're probably, you're the tiniest, or will be. But,
Oh, well.
yeah, third population, James River's probably a little bit bigger, population-wise.
Are those meetings gonna be on Zoom?
The hearings for those,
No, the.
our meetings?
Yeah,
Not right now,
the ones in Pier. are-
right,
okay.
no. That is the plan, but we can see what happens. And then lastly, just a general interest for the group. The governor announced last week in her budget address that she's gonna be dedicating another $95 million of the ARPA funds toward water projects. Exactly what that means is still kind of up in the air. Her words were, we will allocate it the same way we did the last time. And that's mostly the way they give the regular money away, but not exactly. And then there are a few other hiccups, and so it will be a matter of waiting until the legislation is written. But yeah, water's gonna be a big deal. 600 million is pretty cool. 95 is nothing to sneeze at
Right.
for South Dakota.
That's good.
Have you heard rumblings of any other water legislation coming in, not related to allocation of those monies?
No, but and because that's gonna suck most of the oxygen out of the room. But the issue memo, it is difficult for me to conceive that a memo was requested and then prepared without somebody having some thoughts on that. And I've
Who requested the memo?
leadership.
It came out of the legislature.
Yeah, this is something that the executive board of the legislature, which would be, the speaker, a majority leader, the leadership of both
So
parties.
this hand person was part of the LRC staff and turning.
Yeah, and they had like 5 or 6 of them done this time. They're all on hot topics. This is sort of an oddball thing, and the questions are, there apparently there was limited discussion at the April meeting when it was called for. It just kind of came up, and having spoken with one of the junior members of that group, he related that, clearly the fix this was going to happen. And so that would mean it would probably have come from either the president pro tem, the speaker, the majority leader, or the majority leader. 3 of those 4 people live in the Big Sioux River Basin and in a lot of ways couldn't care about the Missouri. But the leader of the House, Mr. Mortensen, lives in Fort Pierre. So I'm kind of thinking that he was the one that pushed for that. Where you go with it is hard to say. There's plenty of water in the river, but we could be back in a situation maybe analogous to the mid-'70s when they opened up who could hold water rights. And that is when all the water conservancy subdistricts back then, Black Hills, acquired those rights. Now you guys went small. We went nuts. We had 400,000 acre-feet of water on the Missouri River that was approved without question by the state legislature in 1977.
Now you have.
All of the public water supplies in South Dakota right now are not using 400,000
Yeah.
acre-feet.
You cut that back now to some number.
We dialed that back on a reasonable thing. I think clearly the intent at the time was to lock up as much water as humanly possible to keep it from being sent somewhere else. If that is the same sentiment that is coming out now, maybe that would be revisited. We backed ours off because it was never going to be, it was unreasonable to expect we would ever use that much as a practical matter. That the original rationale, I suspect, like it would today, has very little to do with rational thought. It's lock it up and keep it from somebody else. Keep Phoenix from asking for.
Well, there was a couple articles in major publications this summer about moving water from the Mississippi with all the flood and sending it to the drier areas of the Colorado.
Yeah.
Like I saw in Newsweek, Forbes, and all that.
Yeah, if you don't have any water, the cost of moving it is irrelevant.
So I'm assuming that came up, and with Missouri River being so close to that.
I don't, that's the only thing I can think of that is potentially out there, and I'm exchanging phone calls with them. Maybe we'll see what happens there.
Jay, if I could just add to Scott, to your point, the other piece, and I believe it may be a form of a resolution rather than legislation, Lewis and Clark is gonna go in for additional future use water permit. I believe it's in the range of about 19,000 acre feet.
Yeah, and any request over 10,000 acre feet per year has to get legislative approval. And Lewis and Clark is requesting.
Have you ever heard of any rumblings about trying to incorporate the rest of the state into various water development districts, the counties that aren't now?
There was a summer study, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, resulted in legislation creating natural resources management district. No, that's Nebraska. Anyway, entities. There was no stomach to actually make it happen. It would have involved the assimilation of us into those new entities. But nobody wanted to make the change.
There's a lot of counties out there not represented.
Well, but they're not paying taxes and they're not getting the benefit, but they're not part of it. McCook decided they needed to have that, and the commissioners in, the upper Vermilion Basin said, yeah, we get it, makes sense. We don't have a fight, because right now, if something bad happens, if Lake Thompson fills, all the Kingsbury guys want to do is dump it. And all the guys in Clay County do is, oh shit, no, don't do that. Well, now you've got somebody looking at the whole package. We weren't able to get it legislatively, we're doing it piecemeal. And hopefully when people figure out, well, hey, nobody died in McCook County, the black helicopters never landed, maybe we can start doing some more tinkering. Roberts, up in my part of the world, Roberts, Day, Clark aren't part of it. You get, you get out in the middle part of the state, there'll be some other stuff going on as well. That will be for younger men.
I don't know the history, maybe Thomas does, but Black Hills Conservancy Subdistrict was 4 or 5 counties. And when those were dissolved and water development districts were created, I don't know what happened that only Western Pennington County was part of that. So it would be an interesting history to figure out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that was all done under Jankel. He dissolved the conservancy sub-districts. They used to cover the whole state. We had 6 of them.
It still didn't cover the whole state, but most.
There were still big gaps in western South Dakota in particular.
They went away in May of '84.
Yeah. Poof. Along with planning districts.
Okay, well, thanks for the update. Let's see. Any items from the public? Cheryl, you're standing up back.
Cheryl, do you have a
I'm
pipeline
stretching my
report?
knees.
Oh, how is your knee, by the way?
Hey, great, thank you. So.
You're moving around pretty good.
Yeah, so thank you for having us again at the seminar.
Yeah, it
November 1st.
was well received, and yeah,
I appreciate
so
that.
it was always, it's a good opportunity to find out what other people are doing in our business, so.
It's a great
Yeah,
program.
and thanks for presenting your
Yes.
part of it, so.
Yeah.
Let's see, that's about it. Before I adjourn the meeting, I want to wish everybody a happy Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Very good. Very good. So we're looking at